Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here at Be Curious 2020 online. We're here to present everything you ever wanted to know about ultrasound, but were afraid to ask. So my name's Amy Rebane. I work for the National Institute for Health Research, Leeds Biomedical Research Centre, and I'm joined by two of our sonographers, Kate Smith and Borsha Sarkar. So just a couple of things before we get going. We've muted you all and turned your videos off to make sure that we don't have any background noise or distractions. There's going to be a YouTube video in the presentation. You'll have a moment where you can turn your volume up to make sure that's nice and loud. And we're also going to take questions at the end of the session. And if you can pass them along to me in the chat box, that would be brilliant. And then I can put them to Kate and Borsha. And remember that no question is too small. We'd love to hear your questions and your thoughts. So what we're going to be covering today? Well, we're going to do some interesting facts about ultrasound. We're going to look at creatures that use sound waves to find things. We'll be looking at how ultrasound works and how it's used in medicine. And then we'll have the live scanning with questions and answers. And finally, we'll be looking at the drawings that have been submitted ahead of today's session and announcing our competition winner. So if I can pass over to Kate Smith.
Hi everybody. So it's October, so it's Medical Ultrasound Awareness Month. So it's really good that we're talking about ultrasound today. So, but did you know that an interesting fact about ultrasound is when ultrasound was first used, people had to be covered in water and had to sit in a bath or tank. This is because air reflects sound and we need a way of allowing the sound to travel from the scanner into the body, and water helps this happen. We'll talk about this more later. We can look at the heart beating in the chest, and here you can see a little video of the heart beating. You can see the 4 chambers, and this is obtained by looking through the ribs, but you can also see the heart from inside using a tube that you swallow. One of the smallest ultrasound machines is small enough to fit inside a blood vessel, and the red arrow on this picture shows the ultrasound next to a coin, so you can see how really small it is. Vets also use ultrasound in their animal patients, even in zoos. And this is a picture of Borsha scanning a cheetah for a program called Animal Hospitals. Your parents may remember this. Ultrasound is used everywhere, and you may know of it of being used in car parking sensors. And when the car beeps, this is ultrasound in action. So Borsha is going to talk a little bit about ultrasound in the animal kingdom.
So hello. Ultrasound is used by a lot of animals, and animals use sound for echolocation. So we're going to take a look at which animals use it and how they do that today. So you may have had a little think about which animals use sound for echolocation, because that's the challenge that we set you today. And we asked you to draw a picture of an animal that you thought used echolocation to find its food. So you might have come up with the more usual ones like bats and dolphins and whales, and they rely on sound to learn about the surroundings. The animals create sound waves and these bounce off objects in their environment. They're able to detect and read those echoes as they come back, and that helps them to figure out how far away an object is. Now, the best way for me to describe this to you is imagine throwing a ball in a playground at a wall. The further away that wall is away from you, the longer the ball is going to take to come back to you. Now, that's exactly how animals tell how far away their food is. Now, that might be a fly for a bat or a fish for a dolphin. So let's take a look at bats. Now, here's a list of animals that use ultrasound. Now, I don't know if any of you could think of the others on this list. Now, the common ones, bats, whales, and dolphins, you may have come across, but did you know that the shrew, which is like a little mouse, also uses ultrasound to find its food? The similar tenrec, the picture in the middle, is a type of Madagascan hedgehog. Birds also use ultrasound to get around and find their food, and the nocturnal oilbird is found in caves in Trinidad, and it lives in the dark in the day, and it comes out at night because it's nocturnal. So it always needs to have something more than its eyes to find its food and get around. Another bird that uses ultrasound is the swiftlet. They also live in caves, and you might have heard of something called bird's nest soup, and that is made from the nest of the swiftlet. It's also thought that hedgehogs produce use ultrasound to get around, and we'll talk about the gecko in a minute. So we've had a look at some animals that use ultrasound to get around and reflected sound, but they use this for a few reasons. So these animals use it to navigate, to hunt, to identify their friends and enemies and make sure that they know which is which, and to avoid obstacles in their way. Now, incredibly, although it's not ultrasound because we can hear it, some blind people have also developed the ability to echolocate by clicking their own tongue and listening to the echoes. How clever is that? Now, I mentioned geckos. Now, some geckos even produce ultrasound, but they do that when they're distressed. So it may not be true echolocation. I guess we're not really quite sure what they're doing when they produce the ultrasound and what it's trying to gain for them. But there's so many things that scientists are still looking into with ultrasound and sound in the animal kingdom. So let's have a look at some creatures that use ultrasound for echolocation, and in a little bit more detail, how they do it. Now, I love bats, and bats are very commonly recognised as using echolocation to get around, and they produce ultrasonic sounds. Now, that means that the frequency of the sound that they're using is higher than the normal range of our human hearing. Now, ultrasound can be heard by a lot of other animals, even when they don't necessarily produce it. So cats and dogs, rats and mice can also hear ultrasonic frequencies, and you might have seen cat scarers which use ultrasound that your parents put in the garden, and sometimes they plug in things to try and deter mice in the house, and they use ultrasound as well. And you can see here a diagram of a bat using ultrasound to try and find its food. You can see that the blue lines show the waves of ultrasound coming out from the bat's mouth, and the red lines showing the bouncing echoes as they come back from its food, which is the fly. So we can take a little bit more detail on the next slide to see how this works. So bats are absolutely amazing animals. I love them. And the ears and brain cells in bats are especially tuned to the frequencies of the sounds that each species emits and the echoes that come back to them. Now, you can see that all bats' ears are not the same, and I've put some different photographs of bats' ears up so you to see how different they are. Now, the bat's ears play a really important role in receiving the echoes because they have to be big to catch them. Depends how far away those echoes are coming from and how strong they are. And the large variation in the sizes, shapes, folds and wrinkles are thought to be useful to help the bat to receive and funnel those echoes and the sounds that are coming from their prey and right down into the brain where they can listen to them. So we're going to have a little look on the next slide as to how the bats actually listen. So why don't bats make themselves deaf? They're tiny little creatures. They're making these really loud noises to try and find their food. So you might think that those would deafen them. But what they actually do, there's something very clever that they can do with the ear. So Amy's going to use the pointer here to show you a diagram of a bat's ear. You can see the outside bit of the ear with the arrow, which has got a little hairy pointy bit because bats have got different shaped ears to ours. But their middle ear canal is very similar to the human. So there's a bit of the ear that goes in towards the brain, and there's a little section called the middle ear that has 3 bones in it. Now, those 3 bones are very similar to the bones that we have in our brain and ear in humans. These 3 bones are called the malleus, incus, and stapes in Latin, or hammer, anvil, and stirrup. And the reason that they're called that is because they look like a hammer, anvil, and stirrup. So if you actually have a look here, you can see that Amy is pointing to the hammer, a roughly T-shaped bone that looks like a hammer. The middle bone is an anvil, and if you don't know what one of those is, it's what a blacksmith uses to hammer their ironwork and horseshoes on, and it's shaped like that. And the last bone is the stirrup or stapes, and you can see that it actually does look like the stirrup from a saddle when you're riding a horse. Now, what the bat does when it makes a sound is it uses a special muscle in its ear called the stapedius to tighten up and separate those 3 bones, and that means that it can't hear such a loud sound. It's a bit like the bat putting on ear defenders when it's making a noise. Now, what it happens when it wants to listen is that muscle relaxes, the bones come together, and the bat's ears are ready to hear the echo from the insect from just 1 metre away. So this is exactly how we use ultrasound in medicine. Now we're going to have a look at dolphins and the way that they use ultrasound. Now, dolphins are quite interesting. We learned a few years ago that when dolphin trainers worked in pools with dolphins and they were pregnant, the dolphins weren't interested in doing any of the tricks and things in the pool. All they wanted to do was to go and have a look at their trainer's tummy. And so people began to imagine that dolphins might be able to see pregnancies. Sometimes the trainers reported that dolphins were interested in the tummy before they even knew that they were pregnant. We know that dolphins make buzzing noises near pregnant women's tummies when they're in the water with them, and this is thought to be a very concentrated form of echolocation. They buzz when they want to focus on something, or sometimes when they want to stimulate another dolphin, and they will put their snout against the skin of the dolphin, or in this case, a woman who is pregnant. Let's have a look at what dolphins do when they are pregnant. So they have been observed buzzing around the bellies of other pregnant dolphins in their pod. And just like ultrasound scans can give parents an image of their baby in the womb, echolocation, we think, can give dolphins a picture, a mental picture of the little fetus. And you can see the baby dolphin in the womb here. This is a lovely picture given to us by the vets that are members of the British Medical Ultrasound Society. So if we have a little look at what dolphins might be able to see, now we can't get into the brain of a dolphin and we don't speak dolphin to be able to ask them whether their picture looks the same as what we're looking at. But we can try to imagine it using a little bit of science. So what some dolphin trainers have done is get in the water with the dolphin using a hydrophone. And what they've then used is some fancy bits of equipment and computers to try and make a picture from the sounds that they're hearing with that hydrophone from the dolphin clicking, using its ultrasound. And what they've been able to do is create a picture, and Amy's going to use the pointer here to show you a black and white picture that looks very similar to the kind of pictures we make with a medical ultrasound machine. And we can see here the whole shape of the trainer's body, the head, the arms, the legs, even one of the hands outstretched, and even the weight belt that the dolphin trainer is using to work with the dolphins while he's in the water submerged. So we can imagine that dolphins probably can get quite a lot of information, which is very similar to what we do when we use ultrasound in medicine to look at both adults and children. Next slide. Let's have a look at what whales do. Now, whales are really fascinating. And a sperm whale is not only a very large kind of whale, it's also one of the loudest mammals in the planet. And its vocalizations reached up to 230 decibels. Now, if you're not sure how loud that is, a jet engine from 100 feet away is going to produce around 140 decibels, and at around 150 decibels, your eardrums will burst. So that's why people near planes use ear defenders to protect their ears. But let's have a look at how the whale uses ultrasound and how it manages to project its ultrasound so far through the ocean to find its food. Now, we're going to show you a YouTube video now, as Amy mentioned. So take a few minutes just to turn the sound up really loud. And we're going to play a video for you which shows just how whales use ultrasound in the water when they're in there with divers.
Show you now is a video of some free divers that I ended up hanging out with. I wasn't with them during this expedition, but I was. About 6 months later, we went on a trip together, and I had the same experience. So the clicks you're going to be hearing are not coming from a boat. They aren't coming from a camera. These are the whales clicking these guys literally from the inside out to see what they're all about. And the clicks were so powerful that one of these guys put out his hand to stop a whale from running into him, and his hand actually was paralyzed for about 4 hours afterwards. So he learned not to keep out his hand in front of him when he was diving. This is an emerging discipline of research, and it's pretty sketchy. But this is what it's like. I'm not going to talk over this. We're going to play this kind of loud so you can really get an experience of what this is all about. There we go. Okay. So you're going to notice the whale's going to flip on its belly. That's where it collects those echoes underneath its jaw. They don't use ears underwater. So he's getting a really good look at him right now. He's diving down now. Okay, so I know.
So we'll go back to the presentation again. So I hope you really enjoyed that video, but what I'm going to actually show you now is a diagram of the sperm whale's head to show you how it's actually doing that and give you some idea of how that's similar to the way that we use ultrasound in medicine. So how do sperm whales generate such powerful sound? Well, they've got a really special head. And again, I'm going to let Amy show you using the arrow. The grey tissue or colour is the tissue or blubber around the whale's head. And then we can see labelled number 1 and number 2, the bones of the whale's face. And you can see that the majority of that head is not skull. So there's only a little bit of bone. There's the lower jaw, the upper jaw, right at the bottom of that, and the front of the skull and face of the bone. But the majority of the stuff inside the whale's head is that funny yellow colour that we've got in the diagram. Now, the stripy area is called the whale's melon, and the bright yellow is a very special liquid which is called spermaceti. It's a very unusual and very good oil, and it's thought to be related to the way that whales produce echoes. Now, if you look with the blue arrows, the whale's nostrils pass straight through that big yellow area, and you can see that the whale has got very long nostrils. If you thought an elephant had a long nose, look at the length of the nostrils in this sperm whale. Now, the left and right nostril pass from the whale's lungs and face all the way through this yellow area to the whale's blowhole, which is number 8. And Amy can point the arrow up to number 8, and you can see where the two nostrils come together. But how does that work in reflecting sound? Okay, next slide. What we can have a look to see is that there's an organ right at the front with a round red circle labelled number 9. And this is an air sac. And the air sac at number 9 is called the distal sac. When the air is vibrated through the whale's nostrils to go towards the blowhole, it reflects against the distal sac and the sound is bounced back. And you can see the green arrows where the sound is returning through the spermaceti organ, the yellow area, towards the whale's facial bones and skull. Now there's another air sac positioned at number 1, and you can see I've drawn a little red lozenge onto this diagram to show you where that is. Now that air sac, just go back a slide. That air sac actually then reflects the sound beam forward again through the whale's head. So you can see that the sound comes back to the air sac, reflects, goes forward and out through the whale's melon. By that time, the beam is amplified and redirected in the direction that the whale wants to send it out. And then the whale uses the lower jaw to actually listen to those returning echoes. And I've coloured that in as numbered number 2, and I've coloured it in again, shaded it in red. So you saw on the video that those whales turned over so that the returning echoes from the divers that they were interested in could be heard by the vibrations that they could feel in the bottom jaw. Next slide, thanks. So some whales from thousands of miles away can use sound to find their food, and it's thought that they can increase the powerfulness of that sound beam and even stun and kill giant squid with their ultrasound. So we're going to hand over to Kate now to have a look at how we use ultrasound and how we make it in a machine.
So to create ultrasound, we need 3 things. We need something to produce the sound wave, something to hear the echoes, and then something to turn those echoes into a picture. So in an ultrasound scanner, we use something called an ultrasound transducer or probe to make the sound waves. An electrical pulse in the probe vibrates something called a piezoelectric crystal, and this creates the sound wave. The sound wave hits a structure or tissue, and then that sends the echo back. The crystals listen for the echoes coming back, and the software in the scanner makes these echoes into a picture. So why do we use ultrasound gel? So as we've just discussed, the ultrasound probe creates sound waves just like the bats, but air reflects sound. So without the gel, the sound does not travel into the body and we get no picture. So instead of sitting someone in a bath to get the pictures like we discussed before, we use thick water now in the form of gel, and that lets the sound travel into the body and we get the echoes back to make the picture. So how do we use ultrasound in human medicine? Well, just like dolphins, we use ultrasound to look at babies in the tummy. It's probably the first time your parents saw you was actually on an ultrasound scan, and you may even have seen your own brothers or sisters like this as well. But did you know we also use ultrasound for many other things? We can use ultrasound to look at the brain in small babies. We can use ultrasound to look at the eyes. We can see blood vessels and the heart. And we can also see the lungs, although not a very clear picture because lungs are made of air. And we can see solid organs in the tummy, just like the liver and kidneys. We can look at muscles and joints, and this is what mainly Borsha and I do at Leeds. And lastly, we can look at skin. So ultrasound can pretty much look at everything in your body. So at the BRC, Borsha and I mainly look at bones and joints. And here we can see some bumps in the bone as outlined by the red arrow. We can look for holes in the bone, which is again where we can see the red arrow here. Sometimes joints can be hot and red and swollen, and ultrasound can see the swelling and the increased blood flow that causes the redness. The red on these pictures are blood vessels in the joint. Bones are hard and a bit like air, they reflect all the sound back. And on the bottom picture, we can see where the red arrow is, that the sound travels through in between the bones of the fingers and allows us to see all the tissues between there. This is the ultrasound room where Borsha and I work. And if you ever have to go to an ultrasound room, you'll go into a similar room and you may be asked to lie on the bed. The room will be made a bit darker by switching off some lights, and then the sonographer, the person who does the scan, will use the gel and the scanner to look inside you, and the picture will show up on the screen. I'm going to pass back to Borsha now, and we'll have a look at some other interesting things on ultrasound.
Okay, so what I've done today is prepare some fruit and veg and other interesting items in some jelly for us to scan, but we also took some pictures of them beforehand, and Amy's going to use the arrow on the screen to actually help you to look at the shapes of some of these fruit and veg and see if you can guess which ones they are. Now on the top left we've actually got a fruit. Now this is a citrus fruit, and you should hopefully be able to see a little pointy top to that fruit. That might give you a clue as to what it is, and think about the shape of this fruit. Now the picture in the middle looks quite big, but I can tell you that it's a lot smaller than the citrus fruit on the left, and this is a berry. Now this is a berry that you might have on your breakfast in the morning, and you might have it on pancakes. Look very carefully at the fact that there's a little square cutout at the top where Amy's arrow is. Now this is a crisscross pattern in the fruit, but because we are looking at a slice, it just looks like a little square, because ultrasound shows you a fine slice of things at a time. Now on the top right hand side we can see a fruit, or some people might say it's a vegetable, they might debate it. This one's on a vine with a lot of other fruits the same, and you can see it's round and circular, and there's a little flower and stem almost, or a leaf and stem at the top where it's attached to the fruit. On the bottom left we can see quite a big picture of something that's also a berry, and this is a berry that you might put on your breakfast, you might pick in the garden, or you might have in jam. Now, if you look very carefully at the shape of the echoes produced by this, you can see that it's got a curvy, wavy shaped outline, and there's tiny little blobs within those, which are the little seeds from this particular fruit. in the flesh. And if you look very carefully in the middle, there's a black hole where the water's gone inside because the stem and hull has been pulled out of this fruit. So have a think and see if you can guess which one that is. And on the right-hand side, we've got a vegetable here. Now, this vegetable is a fluffy vegetable and it's on a stem. There's two things that look a little bit like this. So if you guessed closely and got it wrong, you would be excused for that because both of them have a floretty sort of shape. But you can see that because it's trapped a lot of air, where the air is, that the sound is being reflected and it's got kind of fluffy, disorganized pattern. So I'm going to show you the answers now, and then you can have a look and see how many you guessed before we break into some live scanning for you. So Amy, do the big reveal. Now, hopefully you got a lemon because that vegetable's got a pointy shape on the end. But I don't know how many of you got blueberries, and you can see that little cutout punched at the top of the fruit. And we can see that little shape on the ultrasound scan. On the right-hand side at the top, we've got cherry tomatoes on the vine. Bottom left is raspberries, and you can see the exact shape of that with the ultrasound. With the broccoli, as I say, a lot of air gets trapped within that, and you have to give it a really good soaking with water to get a good picture. But if you guessed cauliflower, that was a really good guess. So we'll move on to the next slide. Amy, do you want to take over?
Yep, I can do. So I'm just going to turn the presentation off for a moment, and I will put Portia on your screens.
Okay, hello everybody. I hope you really enjoyed that talk so far. One of the things I want to show you is our ultrasound jelly. So it comes in a bottle, and you can see that this particular one has actually got a picture of a bat on it. So everything we've been saying about ultrasound related to bats is quite interesting because it's using a bat as its logo. But what we've done today is we've prepared some, I'm going to try and lift this forward to show you, prepared some jelly. I've also popped some water in there to make it a little bit easier to scan. Now the jelly inside here has got various fruits and vegetables embedded within it. It's also got some feathers. Oops, I just spilled water over myself. And a prawn or two. Now, what we're going to do is have a look at those and see if we can get some interesting echoes and reflections from them and see what it actually looks like. Now, hopefully you can see my screen. And I might just have to change the settings on it very slightly. Now, what I'm actually scanning live here is prawn. I'm just checking that you can see that a little bit.
We can see it, Portia.
And we can see the shape of the prawn's head. And we can even catch its eyeball. I'll use my little pointer here. Just there. We can actually see the prawn's brain inside the shell. And its digestive system inside. And if we go all the way down the prawn's body, just turn that up a little bit brighter and make it a bit smaller. So hopefully you can see that. We can see the back of the prawn there. And right down the bottom we can see its curvy tail down here. So there we go, back to the prawn's head and its eye and its face. So I'm going to also scan a little bit of mandarin orange. Now hopefully you can see the echoes from that mandarin orange. And if I just change the setting a little bit, can everybody see the shape of that and the little segments that we can see within the orange? Is that showing up okay, Amy?
Yes, that looks amazing.
And we can also scan some blueberries in that pot. And have, let's see if we can find the raspberry in there. Where's that gone? Here we go. So we can see the shape of the raspberry. Which I hopefully move my head out of the way. And you can see all the little tiny bits of seed and all the little segments that make up that raspberry fruit. Really nicely there. Now what I can also do is show you some jelly babies that we've got in the other pot. I'll just move that around a little bit. So we've popped some jelly babies into this one. And hopefully you can see the shape of the jelly baby. That's the jelly baby lying on its side. And if I try and get it from the other side, can you see the shape of that jelly baby that we're actually scanning? So we've got another piece of orange in here, another one to show you there. And we've also got, this is a little bit tricky, but we've got a little piece of holly. We've got holly leaf, and I don't know if you can see the spiky bits of it just there, and through the water, the spiky bits of the holly leaf, we can see just there. And also, what have we got in here? We've got a wooden splinter. You can see that's a big line. And sometimes we use ultrasound to find splinters in people's bodies when they come in with a wooden splinter. Now, what I've also done is, just so that it doesn't take too much time, I'm going to show you some pictures that I've done here. So we have also got our prawn head here. We can see prawn's tail, orange segment, another orange segment. You can see the raspberry, and in cross section, different picture. You can see the same raspberry again. Now here we've got the outline of a grape, but here is the grape without the skin on. So you can see that the skin is actually really reflective. There we only get the shape of the grape. But if you take the skin off, you can get a much better picture of the flesh of the grape. Now here, this is a feather, and it's a very, very soft echo. I use the pointer, and you can't see that on there, but right in the middle, it's very, very tricky to see. I'm scanning a feather in that jelly. There's our jelly baby. There's our holly. There's our orange segment again. And our jelly babies again. So hopefully you've enjoyed doing a little bit of live scanning with me. And it will help you to understand what happens when you ever go to a hospital and have a scan yourself. You can sometimes see the food in your stomach. And I'm sure that if you ever have a scan, the sonographer will turn the screen around and let you have a look at the picture, and you'll now understand it just like they do. Thanks, Amy.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Portia. So we've got a couple of questions in, so let's launch into those. So you've got two questions which are quite similar. They may well be the same answer, so I'm going to put them together. So what is the biggest thing that you have scanned, and what is the strangest thing that you have scanned?
You're right, Amy. Without showing you the picture of the cheetah before, so you saw the picture of the cheetah at Whipsnade Zoo, but the most amazing thing and the most unusual and the largest thing I've scanned is a Siberian tiger. So I scanned a Siberian tiger at Whipsnade Zoo very many years ago. And they put the tiger to sleep with a little dart, put a net over it, and we had to all run in there and try and scan the tiger to see if it was pregnant.
Oh, that's amazing. That must have been quite frightening, I bet.
Oh, it was really exciting. I found out I'm allergic to tigers as well as cats. So.
Oh, who knew? Who knew? Okay.
Who knew?
The next question. So what are the differences really between X-ray and ultrasound? So why do you use ultrasound in some places and X-ray in other places?
Hey, do you want to do this question?
Yeah, well, X-rays are very good at looking at bone. As we sort of saw before, ultrasound reflects bone. It is reflected by bone, so we can't get very much information. We can only get information about the outline of the bones. But X-rays can look all the way through the bones, and they can get much more information. So X-rays are very good at looking at bones, and ultrasound is very good at looking at the soft tissues around the bones. So we can get different information from different ways of looking at the body.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Kate. So can any damage be caused by using ultrasound or continued exposure to ultrasound?
So I guess we'll both answer a little bit of this. So the way that we use ultrasound in medicine, the power levels are very carefully regulated, both by the manufacturers that make the equipment. And so the type of ultrasound and the frequencies of ultrasound we use only have very low energy levels. And in addition to that, our training as sonographers and doctors who use ultrasound includes making sure that we only do ultrasound when we really need to, that when we do it, we only do it for a short period of time, and that we don't use any of the higher powers of ultrasound for a long time over delicate tissues. Kate, would you like to add anything to that one?
No, I think you've covered it very well.
Okay, and the final question that we've got in then is about the sound frequency that ultrasound uses. So in a medical setting, what sort of frequency is that?
Kate.
So we use medical sound, we use frequencies going up to 20 or 25 megahertz. Commonly we use between 4 and 25 megahertz. The higher the number, the better the image, but it doesn't go as far into the body. So we have to use the lower frequencies to look at, say, tummies and things like that, and that looks further into the body. We can get more information. And we use the higher frequencies to look at the muscles and bones, because that doesn't travel as far into the body, so we can get much more detail. But that's kind of the range that we use.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, both. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to competition time. So just bear with me 1 second whilst I move back onto that section of my screen. So, okay, competition time. So ahead of today's event, some of you submitted drawings of animals that use ultrasound to locate things that are around them. And here is a selection of what we received. So we've got 8 pictures there. We've numbered them 1 to 8, and you'll have an opinion poll that comes up on your screen, allowing you to select which one you think is the winner. So you can see they're represented in numbers 1, 2, 7, and 8, a couple of bats. In 3 and 4, we've got dolphins represented, and then in 5 and 6, we've got whales represented.
I really love that really savage looking whale there, Amy.
It's got some teeth, hasn't it? Yeah. Okay, so we've just got votes coming in now. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's everyone. Okay, so our winner is number 2. This rather fantastic little bat here with rather large ears, which I'm sure Borsha will be enjoying.
Yep.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for all the drawings that were submitted today. They're really wonderful to see and certainly brightened up our morning.
Yeah.
Yes, very much.
Thank you very much for joining our first Be Curious online. I'm going to be bobbing a link to the evaluation form in the chat box. And remember, the fun doesn't stop here. So this event is followed up by Greg Foot, and activities will be continuing until the 23rd of October. You can find out more at Twitter on Uni Leeds Engage, or you can go to leeds.ac.uk/Be Curious. So thank you very much for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.